Welcome back. It is my pleasure to introduce our final speaker of the night. He's a dear friend of mine, a dear friend of Pat Furlong's. His name is Joel Wood. He's the president and founder of the Foundation to Eradicate Duchenne. FED, also known as FED, has been a partner with PPMD for a few decades now. Together, we really crafted an advocacy strategy that lives on today, and we work so closely together. And really, all the progress we've seen in therapy development, advancements in care, the foundation of that has been our work in Washington, and we've done that together and with many foundations. With that, I'm going to hand it over to Joel Wood for a few words.
Thank you so much. Am I the only person who has remarked that when you first pop up, you really do look like Ryan Seacrest in this setting? I'm so grateful for this opportunity, and I know you two especially have got to be exhausted after 8 or 9 hours there today. I wish I was there in the studio with you. I wish I was there with everyone participating in this conference, and I'm humbled to be the final speaker. My son James, many of you know, who's just over there. I probably should have him make a cameo, but was diagnosed in May of 2000. Interestingly, in that room, generally by the time you get to diagnosis, you pretty much know what it's going to be. So the 10 million Google searches and one thing that led to another, and the CK levels and all of that. And in the room at the time that he was diagnosed was the local MDA official. So there were like 8 or 9 people in that little room at Children's National Medical Center, and that person was Annie Kennedy, who worked for the MDA, and then of course had her several years with the PPMD and is still very close in our rare disease community, and has been my brain on all things DMD for decades. But my wife Dana and I were both lobbyists and in DC, and so we turned and we said, okay, we're lobbyists. Where do we go? I certainly had a great awareness of some of the big disease world lobbies. I had a friend at JDRF, Juvenile Diabetes Research Foundation, and they had an incredible Washington machine. And I'm like, okay, where's my machine? Where is it? And what Annie Kennedy told me at the time, sort of had to do it on the fly because of her MDA role. She's like, well, it's not us. You need to contact Pat Furlong. And so, so much has happened during that time, and we try, as you even just alluded to, working with all the other major foundations and anyone who can assist in any way. But the bedrock of advocacy has been what the PPMD has done. And it turned out that, yes, when we made that call, there was just a handful of us. It was Sherry Gunvalson, it was Al Hemphill, and before long, it sort of all morphed into the Muscular Dystrophy Care Act. And so I will tell you, as gratifying as it is, that when James was diagnosed 20 years ago, there really was no particular private biopharma investment in Duchenne whatsoever. And one of the really interesting and tragic things about this disease group is that Eric Hoffman has noted this to me. So turns out back in the early 1980s, when it became apparent that Duchenne was caused by a single gene defect, and it's the largest gene in the body times 10, there were a lot of resources. There was a lot of excitement associated with Lou Kunkel's lab and those who first identified and cloned the dystrophin gene. And then at that moment, you would think that the research would skyrocket. Instead, from an NIH governmental standpoint, it disappeared. It was almost as though mission accomplished. We have identified the gene. That is so tragic. And at that moment when James was diagnosed, I did the math one time that their total investment in, if you look at the four pillars of what is supposed to be, NIH criteria for funding, the need, the severity, the prevalence, and the opportunity. And so if you look at Duchenne, world's #1 lethal childhood genetic disease at the time. We don't use the word childhood so much anymore. Isn't that an astonishing achievement that we can all be so pleased about? The prevalence issue there, the cruelty of the disorder itself, and the scientific opportunity, readily identifiable flaws on a single gene. And yet we had 1/2500th of the NIH budget that was being spent on it. So we can all take our share of credit for the hundreds of millions of additional dollars that have been expended through the federal government. And the 48 or so companies that I think Pat has identified that are now actively in this business, and the billions that are ultimately being spent. Obviously, none of this is going to be fully realized until those cures come. And I was really gratified just before we came back on to hear Pat say that her takeaway is that there's so much more clarity from this conference, that there's just so much more clarity about the promise of gene therapy and ultimately the CRISPR technology as well. So we've got a lot of things in the mix. We're all trying to add to that cocktail of ingredients that can continue to improve the quality and duration of lives. And we still have much work to do. The one final thing I would want to really underscore and put an exclamation point on, this has been so professionally produced. I'm so in awe of the job that PPMD has done in being the networking organization, the scientific organization in the Duchenne world, and to partner with the PPMD wherever we can. But we're still a rare disease, and we've got to punch outside of our weight limit. And so I really urge you. We've made a lot of champions in Congress through the years. You've got an outstanding lobby team, and the Fagre folks as well that are world class in DC. We've got to build those relationships, and do not ever underestimate your ability to make that personal connection with your member of Congress and your members of the Senate. And this is in a world upside down, in a pandemic, in the most horrendous political environment that I could have ever imagined, with so much polarization. Make sure, no matter who your members of Congress are, or if you've got other connections and can employ other family members, make them your best friend. None of the politics of Duchenne are about liberal versus conservative, Republican versus Democrat. And so we just strongly urge you to continue to build those relationships. It's harder now when we're all having to Zoom into our virtual worlds here. But the one last little parochial thing I will mention, we've had sort of a rough division of labor that had evolved over the years, where on our end at the Fed, we really had worked on building the and sustaining millions of dollars of funding through the CDMRP programs at the Defense Department, whereas the PPMD, all the taking care of business with respect to NIH, CDC, the CARES Act, the CARE Act has, and we would try to supplement wherever possible, and it's always been cohesive. But starting last year, we took a number that was only at $3.2 million a year, and with the help of a lot of you through members of the Defense Appropriation Subcommittee in both the House of Representatives and others in the Senate, moved that number to $10 million this year. our goal was because we had the highest percentage increase of any of those enumerated 40 or 50 diseases and those accounts there. We decided pigs get fat and hogs get slaughtered, so we would just ask for 10 million again. And if we can hopefully sustain that, then next year we're going to try to move it probably to 15 million. We got some really special relationships with, for example, Congresswoman Betty McCollum, who's in line to be the next chairwoman of that Appropriation Subcommittee because of PPMD connections. We got great relationships with Congressman Derek Kilmer, another leading New Democrat on the Defense Appropriation Subcommittee, and very influential because of relationships found through the PPMD. So we need to continue to work toward that. Now, 2 weeks ago, the Defense Appropriation Subcommittee came out and we sustained our $10 million in that. But there's always ifs, ands, and buts. This is a horrible political environment where who knows, and that number seems downright quaint when you look at the trillions that is flowing out of Washington right now. But we need to sustain that. And one of our goals is to get it specifically enumerated in the United States Senate. Typically, these lists come over from the House, and then the Senate generally relies on it. But there have been trickling in other disorders that have gotten Senate attention. So that's one specific thing that we're going to be working with. But again, thank you. Thanks to all of you for everything that you do. It's one of those weird things. Hate the circumstance that brings us all together, but love all of you so much. And I'm so eager. Congratulations on such a successful conference under such difficult circumstances. And I can't wait to hear Pat's final remarks. Thanks again for the opportunity.
Great.
Thank you, Joel.
Thank you so much. This is Ryan Seacrest. Now passing it over to Pat for some final thoughts. Pat?
Thank you. And Joel, thank you very much. Am I on? Thank you very much. The conference is always bittersweet, right? We prepare for it, we think about it, we try to serve, we try to listen, we try to do, and then we really love coming together because you're right, it's the most difficult of circumstances, the most painful of circumstances that seems to rip your heart more times than you can expect, more times than you ever thought about. But at the end of the day, we came together, right? I remember meeting you way back when in front of the NIH when I said, they've never mentioned this disease after they fell asleep when they got the gene cloned. And that's what seemed to happen. They said, here's the gene, it's cloned, and let's all go to sleep and do something else. And then I met you. And I can't thank you enough. I can't thank all of you enough who've joined us today. A good friend of mine said, find your us. And I think in the midst of this pain, we've found our us. Thank you for coming to this conference. Thank you for joining us under the most difficult of circumstances. Make your representative in the House and the Senate your very best friends. It matters. They're part of your us, and it's the only way we'll change this world. Thank you for joining us. Thank you to Ryan Seacrest and to Eric Camino. You've done a brilliant job, and I'm really grateful to all you've done. And I know you must be ready to collapse after so many hours online. And thanks all of you who joined us. Thanks to all of our sons who lead us, all of the experts who guide us and find solutions, and all of our sponsors who are driving therapies. We need those therapies as soon as possible, not just for a subset, but for everyone. Thank you again, and we'll see you in person, I hope, very soon. Over to you guys.